House Republicans take two swings at Kansas' newly elected Democratic Congresswoman while she was down the hits to win a second term. Plus, an epidemic of suicides leaves a community grieving and spurs the governor to make some changes. And how high will they go? Some of the state's universities ask for yet another tuition hike, but say it could have been worse. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. I'm Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. Despite a new budget that increases state funding to public universities, most of them this week asked for another tuition hike, though some say not by as much. KSN's Alec Gartner explains.
Earlier this month, the legislature passed a new budget which would increase funding to state universities. Today, presidents from those universities were at the State Board of Regents meeting saying what they still need. All of the 6 state universities had planned to raise tuition prices next year. Now some aren't planning on raising them as much, and some not at all. The biggest increase comes at K-State at 3.1%, meaning tuition would jump $145 per semester to more than $4,800. Emporia State plans to increase tuition by 2.5%.
Despite the 10 years of budget cuts for higher education until now, and we're just so grateful for what the legislature has done, Kansas schools have been really careful about their tuition increases.
Both KU and Wichita State plan to raise tuition by 1%.
Once we got the additional funds from the legislature, we went back and we looked at it.
It cost under $2,000 a semester to be a full-time student at Fort Hays State. In 2020, the school plans to keep it there.
We're among the lowest in-state tuition in the nation, and we really work hard at continuing to drive our price down. So since we had the opportunity with some of the additional funds, we were really pleased that we were able to take advantage.
One school actually lowered tuition. KU Edwards campus in Overland Park shaved $100 off per semester. The board is expected to vote on those proposals at their next meeting in June. Reporting in downtown Topeka, I'm Alec Gartner.
And joining me in studio this week to discuss this and more, we have Senator Oletha Faust-Goudeau, Democrat from Wichita, Representative Christy Williams, Republican from Augusta, and Dr. Michael Smith, political analyst and scientist from Emporia State University. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So, education funding, when we talk about it in the state, so often we're talking about K-12. But higher ed has suffered over the last several years as well. Anybody who has a child, as I do, reaching that collegiate age, and you've got one graduating, Oletha, I know you've got one heading to college or just finishing college.
And one in college.
And one in college. So this is something we're all familiar with. The cost of college just seems to keep growing and growing and growing. Is there an end to that? Is there anything lawmakers can do for that?
Well, I'll say that I'm hoping when the Board of Regents meets in a month or so to vote on this, that they will consider that we just, increase funding for them within the budget. And with me having a daughter that will graduate tomorrow from Wichita State University, and she's already talking about, Mom, I'm going to have to pay back my loans. I am hoping that they will consider the increase that they've received and vote against it.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely opposed to a tuition increase. That was one of the things that we asked the regents when they wanted more dollars. How are you going to spend the money, and are you going to increase tuition? And there wasn't a straight answer that was provided to the Appropriations Committee. So I think many of us believe that we're giving you this increase to help head off that possibility. Frankly, higher education and healthcare are surpassing the rate of inflation more than any other entity in our economy. And I think they need to look responsibly at how they are spending their money, how they're allocating it, and ask themselves, are we doing the job that we're commissioned to do, or we're just asking the taxpayers to bail us out?
Well, I think we are. We have a massive hole. We have lost many faculty positions through attrition. We have part-time adjuncts who make the minimum wage, who are doing the job of a tenured professor. We are trying to fill a hole that is being caused by things we didn't create, skyrocketing healthcare costs primarily among them. And Higher education is not a business. It's not Walmart. We don't hire minimum wage employees. We hire tenure track professors, and that's what you're paying for when you send your kids to college. In real dollars, taking into account our expenses, we are well below where we are when the budget cuts started. The money that the legislators passed begins to fill a hole a little bit. But if we want your kids to be taught by professors, we have got to support higher education.
Well, and I do know that as you look at the graphs, I am a data nerd, so I do stuff like that. But as you look at the cost of university and college in Kansas, and you look at how much the state has put in, there does seem to be kind of a crossover as the state has cut how much over the last several years. Obviously this year they put in more, but as they have cut how much they put in, that tuition has gone up. Is a reversal of that the solution to tuition increase?
Well, we've got to look at inflation for sure.
No.
I would also add that in my department, we are paid well under what our colleagues at peer departments are paid, and we have not received a pay raise since 2008. Most of my colleagues have never received a pay raise since they started, and several of them have even been promoted.
So there's obviously disparity for some schools and some professors and how money is allocated and how it is spent, but that doesn't mean that we're not putting the money into the system. It's how the system determines to use it. If they're not adequately paying their adjunct instructors, if they're not doing the things that they need to with the money that is provided, then they need to rethink their whole system and what they're doing. If you just Google the top 500 paying jobs of state employees in Kansas, you're going to be a little bit disheartened to look at the universities and see professors that are making $700, $600, $500, $400, $300, $200,000. And my other concern with today is that professors are having less and less contact hours with their students. Universities are becoming more research and less instructional, and I do not say that in a blanket statement for all instructors, for all universities, but we do see a trend where we're more concerned, and with quotes, about getting your research on a book that you're going to write for your doctorate than you are with spending time with students in the classroom. And I think statistics will show that less hours are spent in the classroom.
Well, and you have to wonder, especially as we look at WSU, because that one is local and keeps coming up, as they're moving into the public-private partnership, how much of that plays into we've got to do the research, we've got to spend time on the books, et cetera, because that's what's bringing the money into universities. Yeah. All right. Well, we're not going to solve that one today. That seems to be a running theme on this show. We like to talk about all sorts of things, and we can never quite find the solution, but maybe we get a little bit closer each time. Other things that are going on in a move unexpected by many, Governor Laura Kelly Thursday canceled 2 controversial technology contracts that Governor Sam Brownback's team helped craft, sidestepping the public bidding process. The Wichita Eagle reports the governor canceled 2 contracts worth $110 million with CGI Technologies on Thursday. This move comes several months after other state officials reported CGI was having trouble overhauling and outsourcing the Department of Revenue's information technology systems. The company was supposed to create a way for you to pay back taxes online, as well as improve the state's tax return processing. But the Eagle says it missed a key deadline last October, forcing the state to use the old system again this year. The company told the Eagle it has successfully recovered $46.4 million in new revenue in less than 2 years. The state has already paid CGI about a third of the total contract's worth. No word on how much canceling the contract will end up costing Kansans. Now, of course, this is a follow-on on a huge investigative piece that the Wichita Eagle did looking into these no-bid contracts. Is this something, canceling contracts, that happens very often at the state level? Christy, let's start with you this time.
Not $100 million. This is a big contract, but I actually applaud Governor Kelly for stepping in and trying to, at least say this is not going to work. If you cannot deliver what you promised, then it's better to cut your losses. We don't know what cut your losses will look like, but they obviously aren't qualified to be able to finish a job of this scope.
No. Aletha?
Well, I'm going to stick with the Governor Kelly on this one. I think that her vision is looking at leveling the playing field, to be transparent and to not allow us to pick winners and losers, to give everybody a fair bidding chance on the projects.
Well, and certainly this isn't the only no-bid contract that came up in that investigation. It's just a couple of them. But certainly the ones where things don't seem to be happening the way the contract says they should. How common is that in government work?
It varies. I think one of the things we're seeing in Kansas is that under the Brownback administration, public officials were appointed based on their ideological agreement with their governor, not their expertise in the area that they were overseeing. And there was a great hollowing out. My colleague Burdette Loomis wrote about it quite a bit. A lot of people took out early retirement or moved to other states. And so we're working on the beginnings of restoring the idea that we appoint people based on their competence and their ability to do the job, not being in agreement with the governor's ideological agenda.
Okay.
And I'll add to this. I mean, previously it was as if CIG would automatically get some projects, and we need to have a fair process.
And that really is at the base of what the public bidding process is about, is to make sure everybody can see what's going on.
Absolutely, transparency.
Yeah. Well, other things that are going on at the state level in recent years, the state of Kansas has struggled with a suicide rate that spiked up 45%. Historically, suicide is a word not much talked about, but this week, as KSN's Tiffany Lane shows us, one community broke that silence while remembering their friend.
Sorry that you thought it was your time to go, and that you felt so alone.
Emotions running high Wednesday night.
Every person in this room, every single person in this room is hurting.
One by one, friends took to the podium to remind everyone of the happy moments with their late friend.
I'm going to miss that so much, because we would have little inside jokes here and there. Nobody would get it, but we would.
The student died by suicide Friday.
A tragic situation like this reminds us that every single life matters and that we need to wake up. It is okay to grow and to say, maybe I believe something different than I used to about what it means to be gay or lesbian or what it means to be transgender. And it's okay to let our experiences of life and tragic situations like this help us to grow.
For those who did not know the teen, many say there are countless qualities they're going to miss.
Always find a way to laugh and make everyone else laugh.
So compassionate, and it's something that it's going to be hard to live without.
After honoring their friend, everyone lit candles, with each flame a reminder that a life lost does not mean a life forgotten.
You were a star in the darkness, and I wish you were here.
That was Tiffany Lane from KSN reporting. And on Thursday, the governor announced she's creating a youth suicide prevention coordinator to design prevention programs and provide prevention training across the state. Just one more step that's happening. And I know, as I was talking with you, Christy, before the show started, that you guys in the State House have also been working on other methods to try and stem the tide of this epidemic.
Absolutely. In education, in our bill, we worked very hard to try to incorporate something that would address bullying, which also is closely linked to suicide. And it's just devastating that so many kids are facing such serious despair, and it's heartbreaking. And I think that there are some things that we can do to reach out, but whatever we are doing right now, it's not enough.
I'd say that it's pretty fair to say everybody pretty much agrees on that one.
Sure, I agree 100%. And my heart goes out to the families and the other students. I know other people that knew the one who lost his life to suicide. And it's all over Facebook. No. It's even our Commissioner Lacey Cruz talked about it Wednesday on the County Commission program. I want something as Christy just stated, to go into our schools, to be where we will spend money to help save lives, to have counselors who specialize particularly in suicide issues. I have daughters who, one daughter shared with me that Instagram has a page where they rate girls on how they look, and it's just she talks about her friends who are just so depressed and psychological issues, and this is so serious, and we've got to do something to help save lives.
I really appreciate the leadership of the legislators on this, and this is a very sad story, and I don't want to minimize it in any way. I do want to note that it's not only teenagers that are at risk.
Yes.
Statistically, middle-aged men are at the highest risk of suicide, and I want to put in a special word for our veterans who are particularly vulnerable to that.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that we're looking forward for everybody, including our kids, but also for people of all ages.
One of the most interesting things, the most recent numbers that came out for 2016, I believe the 2017 numbers haven't come out yet, at least I haven't found them. The middle-aged men and veterans, et cetera, those numbers are slowly tracking down. It's the teens that are tracking up, and I think that's why they're getting so much of the attention, but that doesn't mean we can forget the other groups that are at risk. I did a story this week actually with the folks at Headquarters Inc. who run the National Suicide Prevention Hotline here in Kansas. And they have seen almost identical increase in calls, 45% increase, the same percent increase we've seen in the percentage of suicides over the last few years. And so they're expanding their space. They're gonna more than triple the number of operators they have. They're adding in more folks to do online chats, because that's what really, talking about that Instagram stuff, the way a lot of this is going.
But Pilar, what's so devastating about this situation is that a lot of them don't make that phone call.
No.
And they are committing suicide because they are not accepted, because other people are bullying them. They don't like how they look, they don't like who they are, and that's something that all of us can do without even implementing policies to address this issue. We need to be a little nicer, a little more tolerant of others, and everybody just wants to be loved and love, and that's all we want. And for people to be rejected and then feel that the only way out is to commit suicide, that is that's terrible. It's a shame that we are in the day and time that we're in now, and we are still hating on others, causing them to take their lives.
And I just might add that, you know, the government cannot fix all these problems. We can add the counselors and we can add the services, and we can do those things, but we need to be just really searching our own hearts. What's the root issue? Where is the emptiness? Where is the despair coming from? What are our kids, are they just entrenched in social media? Are they entrenched in looking at you know, how they appear? What are they giving up something in their lives? Are they stepping away from church? Are they stepping away from families? There's so many things, but if we don't find the root cause, we can provide every service in the world, and it will not change what's empty and hurting inside of kids and adults and veterans.
And we're going to have to leave it at there, because we've got some more stuff to talk about today. Community activists in one Wichita neighborhood are celebrating their win over the cell phone industry this week, even as questions continue about how much control a city has over where cell towers can be built. Cake's Lily Wu has reaction to this week's developments.
Very excited, because they said, oh no, we don't want that here.
Francine Sharp is back on the move, and she can't wait to spread the news.
The council voted this morning, and there will not be a tower.
Wow, that's good news. Okay. Yeah, that's good news.
Yes.
News that a majority of people living close to 18th and Woodland were hoping to hear. Community activists Sharp and Claire Willenberg have won with their big voices.
It's great as a precedent setting for other neighborhoods.
Definitely, yes. And I say, yay! as a group, everyone was able to accomplish what our goal was.
That goal, to defeat an 80-foot cell phone tower proposed at this location in the middle of this residential neighborhood. Today, the City Council voted against that plan, with council members James Clendenin and Brian Fry in favor of that development.
Areas of town that don't have as much access, when we consider capacity that our city is going to need, I feel like this is critical infrastructure.
Those who won the fight say,
Francine has been instrumental.
This serves as an example that neighborhood activism works.
Definitely was a group effort. Definitely had neighborhood support from all the neighborhoods affected. And it's great that it's a precedent that there is protection needed for the first-tier neighborhoods particularly, that are more historic and really have less voice.
And this is something that it's not the first time. This is the second time a neighborhood in the Riverside area has fought back against the cell tower. But there's really a big question over what control the city had over this entire issue. When I was talking with Representative John Carmichael about this, it's his district. And so he was at a lot of these city hall meetings. And there was a lot of confusion over whether or not the city could even say no to this. Any chance of a clarification of that law? Because one group reads the law one way, yes, the city can control where people put cell towers. Another group reads it as, no, the city can't. They don't have a say in it.
Well, absolutely. If there's something that's ambiguous in statute, then somebody from the city council, the attorneys, the neighborhood of Riverside, they bring it to a legislator, a senator, or a representative, and it can be looked at in committee and changed. Because if there's lack of clarity, we need to make certain there is full clarity.
Well, I'll have to comment on this. Their win shows the power of the people, that when they get together and fight for their communities, their neighborhoods, their homes, their property, the people spoke and the powers that be heard them. However, in a similar situation regarding Westar polls, our colleague, Representative Gail Finney, has legislation introduced a bill where she didn't actually get a hearing. She received an informational hearing. I think that her legislation that I know she will reintroduce next year in the 2020 legislative session might address some of these issues. Also, I would add that if we follow the rule, follow the process, whereas we allow that public meeting for citizens to have, where they get all the information and all the facts, not a bait and switch situation, or not half of the information, but if they get all of the information, they then can make an informed decision, and no rules are broken. And again, it's people, they need to have their say and speak out. Sure.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because I want to carry this on over to Michael here, because one thing that several folks told me as I was talking to people in this neighborhood about the concern is they felt like their neighborhood had been targeted because a lot of lower income folks who live there, a lot of non-English speakers who live there, and they felt like, as one of them said, if this had been Tallgrass, it wouldn't have happened here, which is a very well-to-do neighborhood in the Wichita area. And that's very similar to the situation with the power poles that Representative Finney was talking about. Does that seem to be a common denominator? Is money something that comes into play with these cases?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. All kinds of zoning and siting decisions can be affected by that. But as this example shows, it's not always the case. It has to do with the level of activism, and sometimes an issue becomes symbolic. There are other challenges for that community that not having a cell tower isn't going to fix all of them, but it just becomes this sort of we've had enough sort of symbol. It reminds me of a friend of mine who used to be a Kansas politician. He said, I can move $1 million and you'll never notice. But if I try to move a stop sign 20 feet, I'll get 100 people at the next town hall meeting.
Is that not definitely the case in politics? Well, speaking of issues in politics and people bringing stuff up, Kansas Congresswoman Charisse Davids spent time in the headlines this week, not because of her political moves, but because of the National Republican Congressional Committee's actions and reactions to what she was doing.
The Kansas City Star reports that the National Republican Congressional Committee is looking for ways to win back voters in the Kansas 3rd District who defected to Congresswoman Charisse Davids' camp last year. David's seat is a top target for the committee in 2020, which the Star says could be key to the Republican Party's chances to win back a House majority. The Star says the NRCC met with 2 potential Davids challengers this week, former Kansas Republican chairwoman and Brownback campaign manager Amanda Adkins, and Sarah Hart-Weir, former CEO of the National Down Syndrome Society. Both were in Washington this week for a Republican leadership conference. While courting potential opponents for Davids, the NRCC also began to criticize her for a t-shirt she wore. In a photo posted to Twitter, Davids wore a shirt that read, "All my heroes killed colonizers." The NRCC accused Davids of supporting political violence with the shirt. Davids, who is one of only 2 Native American women in the U.S. House and worked extensively on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation near the Wounded Knee Massacre site, says the shirt simply references Native American history.
And that is something to consider as you've got some different cultures going on here, but definitely Charisse Davids, Michael, I'm going to come straight to you on this one, is a target of the Republican Party in 2020.
You bet. So the 3rd District of Kansas is a little bit different animal. It is the most suburban district in the state by far. This district here goes well out into the rural counties around it. That's a very compact, very suburban dominated district, and that's a district where Hillary Clinton did well. She won the district, and what we're seeing nationally is that the suburbs have gone from Republican to battleground to leaning pretty Democratic, especially college-educated suburban women. If Davids can hold that constituency and turn them out, I think she can get reelected, but it's never going to be a safe seat.
All right, and that's going to be our last word for today. Olathe, Christy, Michael, thank you so much for joining
Thank
me.
you.
We always run out of time. It goes
We
too
do.
fast on this show. I hope that you will join us again, and we'd once again like to thank our news partners at KSN News, Cake News, and the Wichita Eagle for sharing their materials with us. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion. For now, have a great week.
Wow.